Hello and welcome to the Mom Curious podcast. My name is Daniella and I'm your host. Today is a special solo episode brought to you by executive producer Laura Lucetti, who is just everything to me. She's the voice you hear, that third voice. If it's not the interviewer, me, or the guest, you may hear a third voice in these episodes, and that's Laura. I'm not sure that we ever really introduce her, and that's a shame because she's the actual best. Laura has compiled a list of questions that she and the Mom Curious contingency, fans, friends, and people who are genuinely wanting to be moms, perhaps they're moms already, and are curious about the mom experience. I belong to that group, which is why I do this podcast. I learn from you, I learn from our guests, and I learn from my own self, actually. Without apologizing before I've even answered these questions or even read them, I will say that these answers are anecdotal, they're my own, and that every single person's mothering experience and journey is so special and unique. But I can speak for myself. The first topic that we will cover is on eating disorder recovery, the 12 steps, in regards to motherhood. And there's some curiosity around OA or Overeaters Anonymous in general. So one of the 12 traditions that they read when you walk into an OA meeting is not to share about OA or AA or any of these 12-step programs because it is based on attraction rather than promotion. Meaning this is not a gang you need to be part of unless you need to be part of it. So if you are struggling with addiction of any sort, including food, please do check out these beautiful, supportive communities. I am very much breaking a tradition, and so have lots of other people. So I say I do it in good faith. All right. The first question is, does this impact or inform your relationship with your children and their food? Yes. When I've touched on this several times because clearly I'm still hung up on it. Sheesh. When Ness was born, I had a lot of trouble breastfeeding. And what that looked like was, I was in the hospital and very little breast milk was coming out. And he was crying a lot and he was hungry. Of course, now I know, in hindsight, he was very hungry. And because there is such a strong advocacy for breastfeeding, the nurses and lactation consultants, my doula, they didn't send me home with formula, I don't think, and they didn't even really help me with him around that. And what was really distressing actually was that there was a really unfortunate adoption situation, or rather, I think a woman had given birth and realized that she wasn't able to be this baby's mother in a day-to-day way. She was giving her child up for adoption in the room nearby, and because of that, the staff was really frazzled and left Ness for way too long in the nursery, and I didn't even want him to be there to begin with, but because he was so uncomfortable, I just felt so inadequate. to care for him. And I thought, okay, so these people, they're professionals. They know what's up. Let's just say I regret that. Either way, it was a really rocky start when it came to breastfeeding. Now, my eating disorder manifests in compulsive overeating. And at the time specifically, it also had to do with orthorexia, which meant that I was so particular about healthy eating to the point of obsession, and the healthy food that I was consuming, and the rules and all of this. That is actually a disease called orthorexia. And because I was in recovery, I could recognize that my obsession with breastfeeding and my subsequent shame around supplementing was linked to my own orthorexia. Also because my doula, who I mentioned in the second episode, came over. She was wonderful in labor, but when she came over to help me with breastfeeding, she would say things like, oh, don't let him get lazy on the breast, because of course he's gonna want like the McDonald's, but like you're giving him the good stuff. And I think she was trying to be helpful and descriptive, but I don't really, she clearly didn't know that she was, talking to someone who has hypothyroidism and polycystic ovaries, and, the shape of my breasts just didn't make enough milk. She clearly didn't know that. And she clearly didn't know that I was really sensitive about that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it definitely impacted and informed that experience for me for sure. I worked through a lot of that in the rooms in OA, doing the steps, sponsoring in that first year, and that was very helpful. It continues. I'm not as active in OA now, but it even continues with my daughter Paz, who had these adenoids. They're basically like right next to the tonsils. She had to get them removed when she was 2. But before they were removed, they were these like very large obstructions that made it hard for her to eat. And she was very stuffy, and she didn't sleep through the night until very recently. And by very recently, I mean last week when we all got COVID. She was like, you know what? I'm just going to sleep. And that's how we got her to sleep through the night. Don't recommend it, but some, silver linings. Anyway, so she had trouble eating, and it was so distressing for me. And she still does. And I really do find that it's not that she has trouble eating now. It's just that like she doesn't have a lot of practice chewing, because for a long time the anatomy just didn't let her chew for that long and breathe because she was so stuffy. And so she's just gaining a lot of strength back, which is, it's phenomenal how quickly children bounce back from these things. But it was so painful for me. And I think now let's be very open about the fact that the 12 steps are a spiritual program, and that God is very present in this healing journey. And so this might resonate with some and not with others, but my children have come here for their own enjoyment, fulfillment, actualization, pleasure in this world. And in so doing, are healing me. That I get to meet my addictions, shortcomings, obsessions through their very pure, innocent bodies means that I can see these things more clearly. With Ness, I would sit in the rooms and I would say, I have an issue with perfectionism and all or nothing ism. And if I'm not exclusively breastfeeding, quotes unquote, it's excruciating for me. It's terrible for me. And I can see that this child is growing. He's happy. He's healthy. And that this formula is medicine for him. I could have something that, just as a side note, something that one of our other guests did so beautifully and so successfully that I didn't really ever pursue fully was donor milk. And if I wanted, I could have. I didn't know of this Facebook group, but there is one now, and probably there was one then, but there are these Facebook groups where you can pick up donor milk. There are some women we spoke about with Neha on the first episode, that there are some women who overproduce, and so they need to let out this supply, this milk, and so they do so and then donate it because their children or child doesn't have a need for it. And so you can supplement that way. But that wasn't a choice for me. And or it wasn't in my understanding at that time, which meant that I had to grapple with science. I had to grapple with my own mother feeding me formula, her own mother feeding her formula. And I had to grapple with good enough being good enough. And with Paz, I'm realizing more and more that she's getting there, actually. She's sleeping, she's eating, she's growing, she's talking, she's magnificent. And these things are not in my time. These things are in her time. And in the larger sense, they're in God's time. But again, the only reason why I bring God into the mix right now is because we're talking about the 12 steps and an OA. And that is a huge component in this conversation. The next question is, how do you cope with triggering situations when it involves your kids? I am far enough into my recovery that I don't know if I don't have triggering moments. Like Halloween doesn't trigger me, and I know that it can be very triggering. Pizza used to be extremely triggering for me in my pregnancy with Paz, because it would be all I would eat. And it was a very stark difference from my pregnancy with Ness, where I was like smoothies all the time. That was really uncomfortable for me, that I was just like eating mac and cheese and, toddler food because I was tired, and I was only getting more tired because I was not really fueling my body. But when we had more play dates, which I hope we're going to get back to soon, there were triggering moments when I would try to have healthier options for my kids, and then friends would offer them more convenient options, and that would just like turn me into like kind of like a really unfun, anxious, mean. I would get a little mean mom. And I think the pandemic really put things into perspective for me. Like, it's really okay. Like, My children are not eating, they're not just eating fish sticks. They eat other things over the course of the day, but also they are imbibing, inhaling, nourishing themselves with the love of friends and community. And it's not always easy to feed a bunch of kids. So let's just pop some Trader Joe's anything in the microwave and enjoy them enjoying each other and enjoy them enjoying food. What are some strategies you have in place to try to help your children avoid the same traps that triggered you and your disordered eating, especially your daughter, as this is a problem that disproportionately affects females? I try not to make a big deal about food. There's a philosophy that says you are in charge of what you feed your child and when and where. They are in charge of the what of that and how much. It doesn't always go my way because I'm not the most structured parent. I'm not the most structured person. On a good day, I just offer them the food that's on tap and I say, I don't have the gummy bears, but we can have that for snack. And if they don't eat the vegetable, they don't eat the vegetable. I have been a little more pushy or suggestive with my daughter Paz because I know that actually with her, it's a matter of the mechanics of chewing, which has been brought to my attention by a food therapist after her surgery when she got her adenoids taken out. And so I try to say have that one more bite and I'll give you this, which isn't ideal, actually. She doesn't have a well-balanced palate. She just won't eat anything healthy. So in general, I offer them yummy snacks and healthy foods. I don't freak out the way I used to about more convenient foods. I think with Ness, I was my son, my older son, I was perfectionistic and a bit orthorexic still. And so he really ate a lot of vegetables and smoothies. And with my daughter, I was tired and lonely. She entered the pandemic at the age of 6 months, which is when babies start eating. When it comes to my daughter and eating, for me, so much of my eating or disordered eating came from an idea that if I ate less, I'd be skinny. And if I'd be skinny, I would be more successful or more accepted or prettier. And so far, I mean, she's 2, but so far linking those two things just seems so inappropriate. It just seems so stupid now. I try not to be on a diet or eat diet food, although Ness will call me out every time I don't share something. He's like, is it because it's diet? And I'm like, yes. Because it'll have stevia in it or some sort of sweetener that I don't want them to eat. So I try not to. I don't talk about my body in a derogatory way. I don't talk about food being fattening. And I don't, I tell Paz and Ness, both my children, how beautiful they are. But I never talk about it in terms of what they're wearing, what they're eating. I've detached the link between food and beauty with love and attention or acceptance or success. And I hope to continue that way. I mean, I'm just on the beginning of this journey, but the last step, the 12th step in the 12 steps is service. And service can look like a lot of different things, but one of the ways we do service is through sponsorship. I had a sponsor who had a daughter way before I was a parent, and she would say, your partner is your sponsee, your coworker, your children. These are opportunities for service. That's what I build my life around, is service, is being of service. Partially for the other person, but they always say it's selfish. You can't keep what you don't give away. So when I share my recovery with my children, I'm reinforcing that in my own self. And I'm reminding them of the pleasure of being of service. Moms are working with limited time every day. How do you prioritize your recovery, working the steps in meetings? I did prioritize my recovery when I only had one child, and when it was pre-pandemic and we were meeting in person. I would go to a meeting a day at some point, and then, maybe it would be a meeting a week. I'd be sponsoring one or two people, but that really fell off during COVID because I had just had a baby, and I've done Zoom OA meetings, and it just wasn't the same for me. So I don't know if it was a matter of prioritizing or if it was a matter of saying, wow, right now I'm okay. I'm okay, and I'm in touch with my fellows. And it was more frustrating than helpful to be on those Zooms. So I took a break, but I hope to go back sometime. If you have any more questions for me, please do reach out. I'm at Daniella Rabbani on Instagram. You're also more than welcome to review, comment, leave a question if you'd like, right here on the podcast page. And if you do know a mom who is struggling with eating habits or disordered eating, there's always OA.org. All right, friends, thank you for listening to this solo episode of the Mom Curious podcast. I hope it helped. For more episodes, make sure to follow Mom Curious, available on all podcast platforms. Thanks.